Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome to this Hut 8 networking tutorial on parsing JSON data using the Python programming language. In this multi-part tutorial series, we're taking a deep dive look at how we would go about parsing JSON data with Python and keeping our topics tightly coupled to the DevNet Associate DEVASC 200-901 exam blueprint. Now, we've already completed 4 of the videos in this series, and we have a fully working application. And in this video, what we're going to learn to do is we're going to learn to add some additional intelligence into our existing Python program. We're going to add in the metric system for those that use the metric system. I'm going to show you how you would add in the additional code to not only get the liters of fuel that would be needed, but the meters that you would have to travel. So we're going to add that the kilometers that we're going to travel and the liters of fuel that we're going to use. As you can tell, I use the imperial system here. We're about gallons and miles, but in a country where you don't use the imperial system of measurement, where you're using the metric system, you're interested in kilometers and liters of fuel. So I'm going to show you how to add that in, and then we're going to add additional intelligence in for some error checking, because right now our program works great. But what happens when we don't enter something in that's expected? What if someone forgets to put in the destination and hits enter? What do we want the program to do? So we're going to add some additional functionality in there, and then we're going to go a little beyond that, and we're going to take a look at adding in the intelligence to parse out the actual status code that we're going to see, and not just parse it out, but give us the message that status code refers to so that we don't have to go look it up on a web page. All right, well, let's dive onto the command line and let's get this knocked out. Here's our program as it stands right now. Let's go ahead and clear the screen and let's run the program, and let's put in Santa Rosa, California. And again, just to make sure that the program still does exactly what we expect it to do, there's all of our JSON output. Here is the URL that we're sending to that. It's the RESTful request that we're sending to the MapQuest API. And then we've got our output here, and you can see we have the imperial system of measurement right here. So we're going to be traveling 54.172 miles, and the amount of fuel that we're going to be using is 2.47 gallons. And then we have our turn-by-turn instructions. So let's quickly take a step back here and look at the JSON objects and the JSON arrays. And specifically, we take a look at our status code. And as you can see right up here in the URL area, we've got the from Santa Rosa, California and the to San Francisco. So this is the exact same RESTful request that we just made to the MapQuest API. And you can see here that we've got that status code of 0. But the question it comes up, what if the status code is not 0? What if, for example, I was to run this program and put in Santa Rosa, California, and then hit enter. Now the program continues to run. We get the URL here, which is incomplete, and we also get some information here. Now, you'll notice that typically when the request works, the messages here, this JSON array, right, the key value pair, the key being messages, the value being a JSON array or a Python list, it's empty when the status code is 0. When our RESTful request is successful, the messages are empty. However, here you can see that we get the error message that's related to the status code that we're seeing. So if I was to paste in and I apologize, I highlighted the wrong code there at the very end. So let's grab this again here. Let's copy that, come back here. If I type in the bogus request, what we're going to see is we see this error code here, but we see the status code of 611, and that is where we get a string as the element in the Python list here, represented by the messages key and then the value being this Python list that we're going to look at the string to get the information as to what that status code relates to. So status code 611 means at least 2 locations must be provided. Again, telling me that I've probably entered only 1 location in. So let's add some intelligence into our program here. And we're going to do some error checking, and we're going to simply add it in down here on the bottom, and we're going to add in an elif. And so we're checking to see if the returned status is going to equal, and we'll put in 402, and we'll take a look at what that code means as well. Now, if the status is 402, then I want to print some error messages out, right? And let me come up here, and I'm going to grab... Oops, sorry, didn't want to delete that. I wanted to yank it. And there we go. And so we'll add that in. Let me give us some space here. And we'll get rid of that there. So if the return status is 402, we're going to print that line out. And then we're going to print out an error message here that simply says status code. Now, remember, we're going to put status code, and I'm going to close the string right there, and then we're going to concatenate another string. But the string, which we're going to convert here, we're converting the return status. Remember, this is going to be an integer value. So we need to convert it to a string so we can concatenate that with other strings. And we're going to concatenate it right up against a semicolon as sort of a separator there, and we're going to say invalid user input for one or both locations. And we'll put an exclamation mark in there, and then we'll close out that. And I want to come yank this line here. All right, and so now we've got the program that it's going to say if. It's checking to see, is this true? If the return status is true, in other words, if it's 0, if that condition is true, then we're going to run the program just like we normally would. We're going to print those turn-by-turn directions out. Everything is going to work great, and we've got the imperial system measurements right here. And again, I'm going to be adding in the code in just a second to give us the metric system, but we're going to get this logic put in here. Now, if that is not true, else check to see if this is true. Is the status code or the return status equal to 402? If it is, we're then going to print that information out. But if it's not 0 and it's not 402, we want a catch-all down here. And we want that catch-all to be, the else statement, right? And so the else statement, and let me go ahead and actually grab, let's say 3yy, and we'll drop that down here because we're going to want these print statements here. But we're going to have some different error message output here. So we're going to say else, and else is our catch-all. And here's where we're going to say the return status wasn't 0, and the return status wasn't 402. So here's where we're going to guide the user to where they can go look to find out what the status code, so for status code, there's my first string, and I'm going to I want a little space in there. And I'm going to concatenate that too. So for status code, we're going to convert the returned status, which is that status code. And we need some parentheses in there. And we're going to concatenate that to a semicolon as part of the string, this next string here. And we're going to say, refer to the following. And this is where we're going to print out. And let's just come down here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to say print. And here's where we're going to print out the actual URL, developer.mapquest.com/documentations, -API status codes, right? And so this is a URL that exists on the MapQuest site that can guide you to the different status codes. And let's check this URL right now. Let me grab this and let's see what is that going to show me. So I open up a new tab. We're going to drop this in here. And here it is. It's the Directions API status codes functional maxims. Or maximum, sorry about that. And so 402, that's the code we entered in before with the elif statement. That would be an invalid location of some kind. We would get a status code of 402. And what would we expect to get with all these other things? What if I leave the at least 2 locations required? If I leave a location off, the status code is 611, right? And so that would be the status code, the returned status that we would see if it's not successful with a status code of 0 and it's not a code 402. We would see if we don't enter in that second location, that's what we would see. So let's run this program right now. Let's make sure we don't have any typos, and let's see what this is going to produce. So I'm going to say Santa Rosa, California, and it's okay that we've got the mixed case, and let's put San Francisco. And we get our JSON data output here. We get the URL that we send as the RESTful request to the MapQuest API. And we get our directions here using the imperial system, and we get the turn-by-turn directions. Now, let's confirm. We've confirmed it works. But what happens if I say Santa Rosa? Whoops, sorry. Let's say, a little typo here. Santa Rosa, California, and I hit enter. Now, remember, we should see some different output, right? And we do. And here's what we're looking for. We get this 4 status code, and then there's that return status variable. That is the integer we convert to a string in our code as the returned underscore status variable that results from the message that from the error message that we see. And you can see here it says refer to the following to get the information, right? Now we're gonna spice that up a little bit by printing out what that message actually is. Because you can see here, the message shows up here, but we know how to parse the JSON data. So instead of telling the user, hey, copy and paste this, put it into a browser, and then go look at the status codes, we're gonna change this so that it actually prints up this element out of the list, right, from the key value pair, from this Python list, the first element and the only element here, which is at least 2 locations must be provided. We're going to add that in. But first, let's quit. Let's VI the program again. And let's come down here and let's add in, if the program is successful, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll say 4YY. And we'll drop it in here. And did I get that 1, 2, 3, 4? I'm sorry, I wanted to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll say 5YY. We're going to drop that information in here. I'm going to put a little break in here. And here's where we're going to add in, for your directions, the following metric system values were found. So here's where we're going to add in the metric system. Let me come back and change miles to kilometers. And the amount of fuel in liters used would be. Now, again, we've got to add some intelligence in here, and that intelligence is pretty simple, right? To go from the imperial system to the metric system for the miles, we simply multiply, to get the kilometers, we're going to multiply that value times 1.61. 1.61. And then on the fuel, we're simply going to multiply that to get from the gallons to the liters. We're going to multiply that times 3.78. Right? So not that difficult. We really made some minor cosmetic changes to the wording, to the verbiage. And then what we ended up adding was simply at the very end, multiplying what we're getting returned to us by, for the kilometers, 1.61, and for the liters, right, we multiplied the value by 3.78. So let's see, does this work? So I'm going to go ahead, we're going to put in some new, I'm going to say Santa Rosa, Whoops, sorry. Let's get that fixed out. So Santa Rosa, California. And then I'm going to say we're going to go to Windsor, California, which is just straight up the 101. And this is hopefully going to give us some nice output here. And as you can see here, it's going to be 9.957 miles. We'd use about a half gallon of gas. That's the amount, that's the distance in kilometers, and here's the liters of fuel that would be required. So we've got the imperial system here, we've got the metric system here, we've got the turn-by-turn directions, everything looks great. Now what we're going to do is, and this will be the final thing in this video in the series, we're going to VI that file, and we're going to add that extra intelligence in here. I think it's good that we tell them, the user, that, hey, if you need to look things up, and I'm sorry, let me get back in here. I want to, oh boy, it's a little slow on the cursor there this morning. So we'll say print. And so here's what we're going to print. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go ahead and say status message. I'm going to create a variable called status message. And what this variable is going to get, it's going to take that JSON response, right? We're going to take all that JSON data, R-E-S-P-O-N-S-E. We're going to take the JSON response. And now here's the thing, right? When there's an error message, and we saw that earlier, what are we dealing with here? Well, we know what we're looking at. We're looking at this key value pair. And we've already kind of worked our way down to grabbing the status code. So remember, I would reference the info and then the status code to get the value. So here I'm going to reference info and then messages. But remember, messages has an array, a JSON array, a Python list that we're going to try to get the first element out of, because I want this message right here that at least 2 locations must be provided. So how would I do that? Well, again, it's just like we did, and where was it at up here for info? And I might be looking right past it here. Where did we have the info at? And I don't see it here. And here, let me just do this. Let me search real quick. Info. There we go. So the return status, remember, this is where we said the JSON response. So the return status variable is going to get the value from what we return here, the JSON response, all of that JSON information. But now I'm looking at the dictionary key info, looking at the next dictionary key because we have nested dictionaries here. And then I'm looking at the status code key to give me the value from that key value pair, right? So I'm looking at the info key to get the value. And what's that value that we get returned? We get a dictionary returned. And so then the next thing I look for is the key value pair in that dictionary referencing the key status code. So I'm doing the same thing down here, right? Where we're going to say JSON response, the info key value pair, and then we get the value back. And I want messages, right? Because I want that to print. But remember, we want the index position 0. Remember, Python is a 0-based counting language. So let's go ahead, and we've got the variable, and that should be, I'm just double checking my brackets and quotes so that we can save some time with troubleshooting later. All right, now here's what we're going to print out, right? We're going to say the reason for the status code, and I'm not going to add, and actually we'll add it in, right? And let's go ahead and add in what that, and I could actually just copy and paste it. So the reason for the status code, whoops, and we convert that value, and it's going to say 611, and then we're going to space here, and then let's add in that concatenation sign, and then our next string is, and I'll put a double quotes there, and then we're going to concatenate that to message. Now, message is a string already, so I don't need to convert it any further. And that should be all we need. And so now the user can go take a look at all of the API status codes, but we're going to give that user the status code and the message. So let's see what this looks like. Hopefully no typos here. Let's make sure that the program still works. Santa Rosa, California, and we'll say Windsor, California. And the program works as expected. Now let's type in Santa Rosa, and let's forget to put in the destination. And hold on one second here. We do have, MESO. What did I say? I said message, but I didn't use message. Hold on one second. What did I use? I used status message. I'm sorry. I was thinking message, but we wanted status message, so I used a variable that wasn't defined. So there we go. So status message, let's clear the screen. Let's run the program here. We'll say Santa Rosa, California, and I'll put nothing in. And now take a look at the intelligence that we have here. The reason for the status code 611 is at least 2 locations must be provided. Let's see what happens if we just put in a bunch of junk here. What do we get back? And that, ironically, actually worked and gave us back the fact that it can't get to those locations. I mean, again, it's the values are 0, even though those locations don't exist. All right, well, this is going to be a great stopping point for us right now. We've gone over a ton of information so far. We've got one more video to close out this multi-part Techtorial. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you're digging in and grabbing out and parsing information out of that JSON data that maybe I'm not here, and making your application look and feel even better than the one that I've produced. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope I've earned the privilege of your time, and I will see you in the next video.